be something from France, but yet it has all of those elements from it. Davis was born in Philadelphia. He was raised in East Orange, New Jersey. He dropped out of school to study with Robert Henry, who was head of the the so-called Ashcan School. And his classmates were people like Edward Hopper and George Bellows. And the thing that Henry exhorted him most of all, beyond just reading literature and philosophy, was to break free of convention and find his own voice. And what you see in this extraordinary exhibition is somebody who found his own voice and found it relatively quickly, sustained it, and developed it over time. Stuart Davis had a very close relationship with both Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney herself, as well as the Whitney Museum. Starting in 1915, at the very beginning of his career, when Juliana Forrest, the director of the antecedent of the Whitney Museum, which was in one incarnation called the Whitney Studio, included Davis's work in a group show. I've seen Davis Berman over here, who actually chronicled the life of the early Whitney days. And Mrs. Whitney showed his art again later in the same year, and in 1918, Davis became a charter member of the Whitney Studio Club, along with artists such as Hopper, Prendergast, and Rockwell Kent. Always believing in and supporting artists, and not just their work, actually supporting them in their life and their livelihood, Mrs. Whitney granted a year-long stipend to Davis so that he could focus on his art without distraction. She truly was a patron, somebody who really believed, being an artist herself, that artists need time to work. And that year, he developed a new kind of direction in his work in 1927, and you see the wonderful and extraordinary, actually, walled egg beaters there, which is great to see together from 1928. Davis was subsequently included in the 1928 Whitney Studio Club Annual, from which Mrs. Whitney purchased 2 of his paintings, which made it possible for him to take his one and only trip to Paris. And when Davis returned to New York in 1929, he gave 2 of the paintings to Mrs. Whitney as thanks for making the opportunity possible. And those paintings are Egg Beater #1, which is in the show, and Place Posteloup of 1928, which is also in the show. And in 1941, when Davis was in the hospital, and he didn't have the money to pay his bills in the hospital, Mrs. Whitney and the museum purchased House and Street, which is also in the exhibition. And at the time, Davis said, "The very nature of art affirms freedom from pain of any kind." So this is a man who really believed wholeheartedly that art could do supernatural things. Over the years, the museums have maintained a long commitment to Davis. In '57, the Walker Art Center organized a traveling exhibition that came to the Whitney. In 1965, the year after his death, the Smithsonian organized a memorial exhibition, which we hosted. And almost more than any other artist, I think, in the history of the Whitney, maybe excepting Hopper, he was in 35 different annuals and biennials from the beginning of the early days of the Whitney. We've continued to include him in group shows, and for those of you who are here to see America's Hard to See, our opening exhibition, his work was featured there as well. We own at the Whitney 27 works, beginning, I think, the first one in 1914, and the last works created in 1964 during the last years of his life. So Stuart Davis is somebody who is really near and dear to us. And this is the first retrospective in 25 years, and it is a radically different perspective. The last retrospective was at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, organized by Lowry Sims, which was a more kind of comprehensive approach, and almost double in size of this exhibition. This one really gets to the heart of Davis in a different way, and it was wonderful because Lowry Sims was here recently, and she said, "My show gave kind of the epic view. This one gave kind of the essential, it's giving more kind of essential view, and the two together you see a very different, but the fullness of what Stuart Davis is about. Davis was always searching for the abstract and the concrete, with a knack for transmuting particular rhythms of American life into the universal experience of art. As he said, things that are heard uncalculated, free associations, calculated logical things, art, music, and the dynamics of New York City. And the art historian Brian O'Doherty said he used to visit him sometimes in the studio, and there would be 3 radios playing simultaneously, as well as a television set. And you look at so many of these works, and you actually see and you almost hear all of the sounds coming out of those paintings. The 100 and so works that are in this exhibition reveal why, by the 1960s, Davis was considered the dean of non-aligned American art. He was aware of movements around him, from American scene to modernist abstraction, but beholden solely to none. The exhibition we're previewing today would not have been possible without the many collaborators. We have 50 lenders, individual lenders and museum lenders, and every one of these works was chosen in a very, very precise way, and they are all, many of them are part of the 4-museum tour, which includes the Whitney National Gallery, the Crystal Bridges Museum, and the Dion Museum. So we're incredibly grateful to the lenders for sharing these works, which was no easy task. And Harry and Barbara did a great job of wrestling the works out, and we are taking very good care of them. I also want to thank Earl Davis, who is Stuart Davis's son, for his enthusiastic support of the exhibition. But above all, I want to congratulate Barbara and Harry. They are a great team. The exhibitions, each of them is curated, of 20th century American art, and artists really span the century, although, as Harry likes to say, he really isn't a specialist in kind of pre-war American, and what he does bring to the picture, and I think is amazing, is given his interest in artists like Mondrian and Cezanne, bringing together the kind of how Europe meets America in the work of Stuart Davis. The two of you have produced an extraordinary show. In fact, I really didn't want to come up here to talk. I wanted to spend a lot more time just looking at the show, as I'm sure you all will. And I just want to say that in this show, and I felt this over and over again, that every work seems to have found its right place on the wall. Every piece feels essential. And each time as I walk through, I try to imagine it without one of these pieces. And it feels like every piece is essential to making the show. There's nothing more and nothing less than needed to be said about this extraordinary artist. They really made everyone count. So thank you too for working so hard and so long on this exhibition. I also want to acknowledge Sarah Humphreville, the curatorial assistant who worked so hard on both the exhibition and catalog. Where is Sarah? Someplace right over there. I'm looking right at you. I want to also acknowledge Scott Rothkopf, our Deputy Director for Programs, and the Nancy and Steve Brown Family Curator, who not only has a long title, but he has a very big job. We had 16 exhibitions in this opening year. This is one of the exhibitions that Scott has overseen, and he's done an extraordinary job in this opening year, which was very taxing, but most exciting, I think, in our recent history. And above all, I want to thank my beloved staff of the Whitney Museum. I mean, truly beloved, because these are people who always put the art and the artist first. They work very long hours. If the artist or a museum or a donor needs something, they're willing to put aside their personal needs and their time to do the right thing for the museum. And a number of them are here today. And I'm looking at all of you who are scattered throughout the room, and just want you to know how much I appreciate that you always do that. I want to acknowledge Morgan Stanley, who was the major corporate funder of the show. They also funded the Stella show. What I liked is, here we had Stella, who everybody thought they knew all about Stella. I think most people feel like they've known everything about Davis, and these are two artists, I think, that we've presented new views of, and Morgan Stanley has been very supportive. Also, the Henry Luce Foundation and the Terra Foundation, who are great supporters of American art scholarship, and are always there for museums in doing that. There's also a very special fund called the Barbara Haskell American Fellows Legacy Fund, which was set up in honor of Barbara, who's been here for at least, I think, 2 years now, plus some. But Barbara, who has really worked so hard and so long on American art, American modernism, American pre-war art, a group of supporters came together to create a fund to make it possible to do the exhibitions, the conservation, the research, the travel, the publications related to this. And so it was set up in her name, and well deserved. We also got an indemnity from the Federal Council of the Arts and the Humanities, which these days, as you all know, insurance is a really expensive thing, and the more support we can get from the government for support of shows both that travel in the United States. It used to be we only got support for those that went outside the United States. And I'm going to end with just a quote which I lifted from the incredible chronology in this catalog. And I have to tell you, the essays in this catalog are great, but the chronology is a novel unto itself and truly worth reading. I was particularly struck because I never really quite think of Donald Judd and Stuart Davis in the same breath. And as I think most of you know, Donald Judd wrote on art and not always so happily about the things that he wrote about. And he really didn't like American painting in general, but I think he really had very little regard for most pre-war American painting. But he did say something very complimentary about Davis. He said, some older artists abandoned developed styles for one of the various ideas included under abstract expressionism, spoiling both. Davis must have also faced the fact of increased power and different meanings. Instead of compromising, he kept all that he had learned and invented, and taking the new power into account, benefited. It takes a lot not to be smashed by new developments, and a lot to face power and learn by it. And I think it says a lot about Judd, but it does also say a lot about the coherence of their spirits and, in both cases, the relentlessness of both artists. I would like to also acknowledge that today we are opening the commission project by Virginia Overton, which is out on our fifth floor outdoor gallery, which is around the corner. It's, I think, an extraordinary project. It's the second of our projects. Those of you who were here last year, you saw maybe the Mary Heilman piece. So this is the second commission project outdoors, and it's kind of a living group of sculptures and installations, which Scott Rothkopf will talk to you a little bit about, but I want to acknowledge Scott, who curated the show, and Laura Phipps, who worked with him on it. And I would like to also acknowledge Bob and Pam Gergen, who helped support the exhibition. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Scott Rothkopf, who will introduce Barbara and Harry.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Those of you who've seen me do this before, I don't usually have notes, but I'm not good with numbers, and I have a lot of them. You'll see why in a moment. It's my great pleasure to welcome all of you here this morning, and also to share with you a little bit about how we sense this exhibition fitting into our summer exhibition schedule. And it's really, I think, going to be an amazing season at the Whitney, even right now, to be in the building, to see all the different layers of our program and what the museum is about, starting on the 8th floor with Miracels, the 5 young sculptors who have been supported by this museum. We went out on a limb for them, just like the museum once did for Stuart Davis. If you look at our human interest portraits from the collection exhibition, you'll see some of Davis's friends and fellow studio club members, as well as his great patron, Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney, represented both in an artwork and as an artist. And then on the terrace, as Adam mentioned, we have Virginia Overton Sculpture Gardens, which just opens today, that I co-curated with Laura Phipps, and we're really thrilled to be giving a younger artist the opportunity to think about our building in a new way. It's amazing to me how this building, 1 year in, keeps unfolding itself to us and revealing itself in new ways. Virginia's idea was to really think about the interface between the indoors and outdoors, and as you'll see, she opened up the window that had not been revealed yet. And in this gallery, you'll see that we've taken the walls down from the ceiling so that you really get a sense of the span of the building. And I think probably for several years, we're going to keep finding new ways of presenting art in this building. I want to give you also a sense of what's coming up next month at the Whitney. Next week, in fact, we will hit our 17th show in under 1 year to open, which is our Dandelion Exhibition. And there'll be a press preview here on Wednesday, June 15th from 9:30 to 11:30, so I hope you all can join us for that. And then into July, we have 2 really amazing performance projects. And the performance program at the Whitney has been so robust this year, but it's the kind of thing where if you blink, you'll miss it. So I hope you'll look at whitney.org, check out the dates, but I want to mention Sybil Kempson, who is going to be doing a project called 12 Shouts to the 10 Forgotten Heavens. This is why I need my notes for numbers. On June 20th at 6:34 p.m. And for those of you who know anything about the seasons and the sun, that number 6:34 on June 20th is to mark the summer solstice. And this is actually a 3-year project where Jill will be marking through performances the solstice and the equinox. over 3 years. So we'll have 12 linked performances, and I really encourage you all to come and see this. You have to arrive promptly. It's like Hamilton, no late seating. Then on July 29th, we have Jill Crozen, who's a really amazing performance artist from the 70s who hasn't performed anything in really 30 years. And it was interesting reading one of the critics of her work, Sally Barnes, writing that in her live performances, she condenses political events with soap opera plots and infantile rationalizations about the way the world works. I think that would be perfect for this election season. And finally, I want to mention our upcoming artist project with Sophia Almeria, which will be opening July 26th. It's called Black Friday. It'll be in the lobby gallery. And Sophia is a very interesting young artist. She's born in Tacoma, Washington, of Bedouin Qatari ancestry. She lives between the Emirates, London, and the US, and she's going to be making an amazing video installation that has been filmed in a shopping mall in Doha. And this gives a sense, too, I think, of the international reach that the museum is constantly thinking about and new ways of considering who an American artist is. With that, I want to introduce Harry and Barbara. They really, neither one of them needs any introduction, but I just want to say on a personal note that one of my great pleasures of having come to the Whitney and been working here for the last 6.5 years has been to learn so much from Barbara. I really didn't know that much, like Harry, about pre-war American art when I got here, and it's been a real privilege and honor to learn from such an incredible master of this field, but also someone who has such energy and enthusiasm. She's this incredible champion for this art, and I think you feel that in this show, the kind of effervescence, the freshness of the exhibition starts a little bit in Barbara's heart. And also to say something about Harry, who's the curator of modern art at the National Gallery. He was someone I knew back in my college days, and I had a great chance to learn from his exhibitions at the Fogg Museum, each of which was a kind of incredible jewel of a show, so thoughtfully considered with beautifully written catalog essays. And I feel so lucky to have Harry's work back on view and to have the two of you here to teach us about Stuart Davis this summer. So with that, I'm going to introduce Harry and Barbara, and they'll be leading a tour of the exhibition. Thank you.
Before we walk you through the show, we thought we'd just tell you a little bit about it. One, you'll probably notice there are two things that are very different about this show than any other Stuart Davis show. One is that we focus just on the mature work, beginning with the tobacco pictures in 1921. And I think what it does, he was an artist, studied with Robert Henry, and then saw the Armory show, which was a revelation, and then spent the next 15 or so years trying to reconcile the idea from Henry that art had to mean something, that it had to connect to everyday life, with the ideas of modernism, that the idea that art had to be autonomous. But we decided to jump right to that moment when he succeeded in that union. And I think what it does, over half the works in the show are after 1950, and I think that what the show does is it presents a new view of Stuart Davis. He's always been revered, probably why you all are here, revered as an early American modernist, a force in the first part of the century. I think what this show does is it shows him as a fantastic post-war artist. We're surrounded by these amazing canvases that are done in the 50s and 60s and stand unusual, but stand right in step with the geometric abstraction that was beginning to come alive during those years. The other thing that the show does is we focus on his working method, and you can see this room is a great example. After 1940, Davis went back to earlier work as springboards for new compositions, and he looked to his own work to create new compositions. So in this, we're surrounded right here by a group of paintings that he did in response to a 1956 commission from Fortune magazine to do a painting on the glamour of packaging, is what they called it. He went to the grocery store, took lots of products, bought products, brought them home, and then began to do sketches to decide how to make the painting. And you can see in the case a number of sketches where you see him almost as his mind works to focus on the words that then become the surrogates for these products. And you can see him, first he uses ketchup and various other products until finally he focuses on these. And in the gouaches and the painting, this piece, for example, on my, you can see how he's focusing in on certain aspects, kind of cropping the painting to create new versions. American painting, your very far back, was done for the first Whitney annual. It went through several iterations itself. The four figures that you see are de Kooning, Stuart Davis himself, Graham, and Gorky. He went back into the picture after Gorky died, and you can see the X mark that probably identifies Gorky no longer being in the world. The words on the left-hand side, it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. This idea that these two American artist and an American jazz musician. Then he goes back again in the 50s to this picture on this wall, and you can see it just totally transforming a picture from an earlier date into something totally unique. So these are two different things that the show presents. One of the things that I'll let Barry speak in a moment, but one of the things that I've come to realize about Davis is that one of his brilliance, kind of the genius of his work, is that he had this vision that art had to connect with everyday life, but he also wanted to be an abstractionist. And so he found this way of using abstract forms to convey the enthusiasm and spirit and ebullience and joy of everyday life. He talked about that art had to have a social role, and that one of the things that he set for himself, one of the goals, was to create out of the chaos and disorder of the world a constructive order in his paintings that would then give proof that order and harmony were possible, and that one could actually derive joy from the shapes and colors of the environment. And I think Adam quoted the review from Don Judd, but I think it's appropriate. The final lines of that review is there should be applause. So I think there should be.
I don't want to speak too long here. I think we all want to move around the show together or somewhat together. Barbara really said it all. I think the one thing I would add is that less is more. I think that was one of our principles here. This is not by any means the largest Davis show ever. I think we may say there's 100 works or so that include small drawings. So it's really about 75 masterpieces. And we felt that there's so much going on in each painting to think about, to look at. They really bombard you, and we wanted to slow things down and to focus on so much that's going on in each work. And I think Barbara's hanging, very generous hanging here, really allows that to happen too. So I love these relationships that we see here. We're going to see them somewhat differently in Washington at the National Gallery. I was just looking over at this particular member of the series on my right here, and thinking about it, and the words in particular. What do all those words have in common? Bag, pad, cow, free, juice, cat, large, new. Three, very few 4 and 5 letter words. One syllable. I think that's pretty important. And Adam was saying about, American art, and I hesitate to throw around national labels too much, even here at the Whitney. But I think that monosyllable, that very, curt, short, direct kind of speech, whether it's his speech with words or his speech with color, it is American. And there's something, those are good Anglo-Saxon words, a lot of them. There's that one word, Annie, that does have 2 syllables, and that happens to be a word with a big role in his elaborate art theory, having to do with the fact that any subject matter is as good as any other. And I think he proves that with this shopping cart picture. But the other thing about those words that I like is that, yes, they might have come out of the bag of groceries, but every one of them has double meaning. And we know that Davis, especially after the war, was immersed in the culture of jazz and New York jazz and jive and hip talk, and think about those words. What's your bag? Come to my pad. Let's drink some juice, it's 100% something. So, be a cool cat. And that was Davis. You know, he loved playing with all kinds of language, visual language, verbal language. I know that all of that sounds corny now, but that was, he loved that kind of talk, yeah. So, should we go?
So we
and
invite
start?
you to join us on the tour. We're going to start at the first gallery with the tobacco and product pictures. So if there's a cool cat, join us.